Managing accessibility with a well-governed design system.
Yes, I think design systems are a really key thing for us. I think before we go into accessibility, it's probably best to just have a think about what they are and what they mean and how useful they can be to you. The principle for us is they're about governance and they're about smart operational practices, right? So if you go back a few years and so a lot of people still work in this way, when you approach website design, you get a designer who kind of opens up a Figma or used to be Photoshop, any kind of design package, and they say, "What am I going to design now?" And you almost start with this blank screen mentality. And then when you work with coders, they'll often do the same thing. Okay, I've designed this. Now, how long will it take to code that? And I think if you work in any kind of design and technology based environment, people will have worked in that environment at some point and seen the amount of inefficiencies that it makes. It makes inefficiencies all the way through the whole process, not just through designing technology. Because if you ask someone what they want to build and then you give them a blank canvas to work on, people will re-architect an app, or people will say, "Give me Amazon" or something similar. Somewhere in between, something will happen, and that whole process is really, really, really inefficient. And what a design system does is it gives you a series of components, which, if you consider like a login being a component, or you consider when you look at a blog and there's a bunch of cards are a very typical web component. So, you can break down most websites into about 10, I don't know, what do you think, Luke, 10 to 20 components? And these components are really what's in every single website. And then if you have a design system, what you're able to do is actually have a component that will work in most circumstances, and then you can adapt the component for what you need. And then rather than opening up Photoshop and making a component every time you need one, and then a coder having to type in the code for a component every time you need one, you're actually reusing what you have already, and you're using things that already work and are already tried and are already tested. So that when you come to actually saying, should we use this component, you should use it because you have the data that says it works. And therefore you can just cut through so much unknown stuff, and you can cut through one of the things that always happens in our experience is you might work with a company who've got a board level set of people who are really who want to recreate something, but they don't really understand how to do it, and therefore you'll go round and round in circles and circles and circles trying to meet the thing that they think they're trying to make. Well, actually, you could have made it in probably a week with a bunch of pre-built components, because you're not trying to reinvent everything every time. And so all the way through that cycle of presenting to people, of working out what to do, of working out with the other stakeholders what should happen, to someone designing it, to someone coding it, you save time by implementing a really well-governed design system.
Yeah. And I think the thing with the design system is you go through a very robust design process to make these components and the element parts that make up the components. Then that's transferred sort of into code. And you have a sort of a repository for the code and the corresponding designs that are just maintained at all times. And then at that point is where it comes into accessibility. You can bake in the accessibility from the start. So you can design stuff that is inherently accessible to the latest design, to the accessibility standards, and then you have the corresponding code that is also to the latest accessibility standards. So you're not just sort of thinking, "Oh, let's make something, put it out there," and you go, and then after you've launched it, it's sort of like, "Oh, wait, is that accessible? Let's go back." And you have to go back to design, and then you have to go back into build, and this and the other. You can bake in accessibility from the very, very beginning, which is really important. There's 16 million, I think, disabled people in the UK of some variants, not including temporary situational impairments as well, people who are injured or whatever. Which means it's very, very important to make sure that your sites are accessible. But more than that, baking it in from the very beginning saves money, really, saves time and money. I think IBM did a study that changing something post-launch can cost up to 100 times more than sorting out at the very beginning. Yeah, because if you think about it, you make something, you launch it, that's your work done. Then you assess it, which takes some time. Then you decide, oh, that's not working. You take it back into design. Then it goes through the whole process of design again, through to build and through to launch. It just costs so much more to do that afterwards, and then that might have sort of a knock-on effect to things around it, and then suddenly the whole thing has spiraled out of control and started to cost quite a lot of money just to get up to standard that it should have been at the very start. So by implementing a good and well structured and well governed design system, and baking in the accessibility at the start, one, make sure that your site is accessible, which is very important for reaching all of your customers. But two, it will actually save you money as well.
That's a great explanation.
Thank you.
It does. If I can add, not everyone's used to doing it. It takes a bit of a cultural shift. Is something that we've noticed. Like some organisations will adapt better to it than others. I think the key benefits is if you can follow the structure and you can be structured and follow governance, you can then be more predictable because you can do things faster and you know how long things will take because you don't have to create all the code from scratch and you don't have to go through a design process for everything that you do. But actually, a lot of organisations might struggle with that and sometimes treat everything bespokely, and then you fall into a trap of having a design system, but then you kind of change the design system for everything that you do, and that's an interesting dilemma. Try not to, bespokeness is good, and there are always times when you should have things bespoke, and everything should always be on brand. So having a design system doesn't mean it's a templated site. It means there's a component that works in this way, if that makes sense. And I think there's two things there, but it's not necessarily a template. It's not the ability to look like a template, or it won't restrict you so you look like a template. But I think moving teams into using design systems is interesting because you actually say no more sometimes.
There's an argument that it actually enhances things like creativity anyway. Once you got that good solid base sort of there, and then you want to roll something out that's perhaps going to be ever slightly different, because you've got the good solid base, you can actually spend your time and energy on the things that are going to elevate it for this particular need, without just starting with a blank slate again, so that the components that you've built and the building blocks of those are good at displaying whatever information it is you need to display. And then if you think, okay, well, we've got this need for something else, a specific landing page that we want to do something special here or animate there or have a video here or this, that, and the other, it's fine, because at least you've got this good solid base that actually takes care of 80% of it anyway, and it works. And then the effort can go into this sort of 20% of effort to elevate it to this new need of yours. So really, you build on top of the system as time goes by. So you evolve it, but you evolve it through the needs of a particular thing, and that in a way that's governed by people that means that you're not going to sort of start building it and then take the whole thing down again and build it back up. You're going to sort of just elevate the bits that you've got for the new need that you might have. So a lot of people argue that it stifles things like creativity, but I would argue it does the opposite. By providing a solid base, you can then spend a lot of effort and creative thought, to absolutely sort of augment it and elevate it further.
Yeah, because you should be focusing on user journeys and prototyping and propositions and the visual design probably to make a really good brand experience that talks to someone, rather than how do I want my blog card to look, and redesigning a shopping cart. We don't do a lot of e-commerce, but I bet there's been 1 million shopping carts redesigned, and they all work pretty much 99% the same. So you can see why you don't necessarily want to fall down that route, and it's an easy route for designers to fall down, because designing something like a shopping cart or a login system is quite a straightforward thing, because you're designing user interface elements, whereas actually you really want to be focusing on designing how you're going to get people to the right place and how you're going to get their data from them once they've trusted you, and all those kind of things which are way more important.
And you mentioned brand a couple of times there, James, and I imagine from a marketer's point of view it helps protect all of your brand identity and make sure that it remains consistent and no one sort of twists it around.
It does. It's really useful. It's really useful at a kind of CMO level, because if you've got people who are trying to twist your brand around and you've got a signed off design system and it is well governed, you can just rely on the governance and say, actually, these are the things we're going to use to do this, and they're already designed, they're already coded, and the winning kind of the home run for that is because you don't have to pay again to recode them. So once you've got your design system in place, rolling out new things with it is much faster and it's much cheaper because you're not having to recode it again, but it also puts you in that element of control.
Well,
So,
you think about it, it is also the first brand interaction people have. So in a sense, a lot of people think of brand as in colors and type and messaging, and of course that is a big part of it. But in the digital world, actually, the first brand interaction someone often has with you is your site or your app. So the effectiveness of your user interface elements is that first communication. So it sort of is the brand in that sense. And so if you approach it that way from the start, and you say, okay, we need to be communicating in this way, so therefore we should have these elements here, and more than just color and type. You're governing your brand, and so because there's a sort of a tendency with digital design, like I say, to start from scratch all the time. You'd never do that if you were doing brand design. You wouldn't say, okay, we're going to make a new page, let's rethink some of our brand. You'd never do that. It's sort of enshrined, and it's gone through a whole process of, again, that governance, and if you think about your user interface as a core component of your brand communication, and often the first port of call of anyone interfacing with your brand these days, it should be taken as seriously. Any changes to it should be taken as seriously as, we're going to change our brand colors or we're going to change our brand font. Well, if you're going to change your signed off brand sort of card display, that's just as important, actually, and just as big a decision. So it should be taken as seriously as that.
Yeah. Everyone we work with, we create a design system for. I think it's worth looking at that difference between high performing enterprise or corporate websites, and in our innovation accelerator space, they're big sites and they're business critical. So again, if you were doing it for a shop, or a small business, you might not need that level of governance because you might not change your site that much, or you might be working one-on-one with a web developer who can do that anyway. But if you're working for a large corporate entities, so to speak, these things are really important because there's a lot of stakeholders involved, and there's a lot of people with opinions. There's a lot of people whose expectations have to be met, and the governance just really allows you to, once those expectations have been met with the initial set of design systems, you don't really have to change. Like as Luke said, you shouldn't really be changing them unless there's a real need for it, and then you can really lead into that, and it helps it helps control everything so much.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Should we move on to the next point?
No, I think we should talk about this for 10 more minutes.
I probably did. I'll save that for the next episode.
Right, there we go. Yes. Sorry, that's my fault.
Okay.